Untitled Sports Central will be going over our next final prediction of this offseason, and it's going to be over the Colorado Buffaloes. And this is a team that was 5-7 last season, ended up having a bit of a disappointment of the season. Of course, they started off pretty well, and they had a couple of really good wins at the start of the season especially, and they kind of declined as the season went on. But how will this team do in 2020 is what we're going over here today. We're also going to be going over your returning production along with a full prediction and preview on every game on the Buffalo schedule going into the 2020 season. So with that being said, let's look at your season trends from 2019 for this team. Once again, they were 5-7 overall. They were 3-5 between September and October, then 2-2 between November and the postseason. So, all around, this team did start off pretty well. If you look at the first couple of weeks of their season, they were able to beat off Nebraska and Arizona State in that September. They beat off Nebraska 34-31, and that was an overtime game. It looked like Nebraska was going to get a big win there with Colorado coming back in the end, but they also beat off Arizona State 34-31, and I would say that was probably their signature win of the season. Arizona State last year, you can't forget, they were a great team. They were ranked for a good chunk of the season, and it looked like they would have had a shot at that Pac-12 South division at one point. Arizona State for sure, that was a big win for this Colorado team, and they also were able to beat off Washington at home 20-14, and so you were able to beat off three pretty good teams all around. And so in the end, 5-7, it doesn't look like a very good record, but you also do have to consider the good wins that this team really did have. In the returning production, you do lose their starting quarterback in Steven Montez, and that's going to be a big loss for this team going into 2020. If you look back at him in 2019, he was able to put up 2,800 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions, also put up 63% completion percentage. So he all around was a great quarterback last season. I would probably say he was probably a top half quarterback in that Pac-12 conference last season. All around, he was a great player, great quarterback, and so that's going to be a tough loss for Colorado in the end going into the 2020 season. Good thing is, though, the running back core looks great. They do return their top running back in Alex in last season. He was able to put up a very good season, put up 996 yards, nearly 1,000 yards of offense in 2019, along with 5 touchdowns. And they also returned their second running back in Jaron Mangum. And last season, looking at him, he put up also some pretty good yardage. 480 yards is what he had, along with 3 touchdowns. And so, they had 2 running backs that combined for nearly 1,500 yards last season. So the running back core, no doubt, is looking very good. I'd probably say that's the best looking position on this offense and on this team going into the 2020 season. But they do lose their top wide receiver in Laviska Shenault Jr. He's going to be gone for next season, and he put up, last season he put up some pretty great stats. Looking at him, he's a big-time player for this team. 925 yards is what he had, along with 6 touchdowns. And they also lose their second receiver in Tony Brown. And looking at him last season, he was also a very big player. 740 yards is what he had, along with 6 touchdowns. And so they had 2 receivers that combined for nearly 1,800 yards last season. So, both of those receivers are going to be very tough losses for this team going into next season, and that's really where the concerns are for me for this team, is whether or not the receiving core will be able to live up to what it was last season. And looking at their third and their fourth wide receivers in KD Nixon and Dimitri Stanley, it's going to be big for this team to return them. Looking at KD Nixon last season, he did put up a good amount of yardage as well. 480 yards is what he had. And looking at Dimitri Stanley, he put up at 326 yards and 2 touchdowns. And so this team in general those 2 receivers put up nearly 800 yards of offense last season, which really is not terrible, but it's nothing much in comparison to Laviska Shenault or Tony Brown. And so, there are some concerns there in the receiving core for this Colorado team for sure. But as far as the offensive line goes, you only lose 1 on there. So the offensive line's looking pretty good, but you do lose 1 defensive lineman. You lose 2 linebackers and 1 in the secondary. So this team is losing 4 on the defense, but in the end, this defense is not looking terrible, I would say. And so it brings up the question, chances of a bowl game in 2020. Of course, Colorado barely missed one in 2019, and basically how bowl eligibility should work for next season is as long as you're over 500 as far as your record goes, it looks like you will make a bowl game. And so that means for Colorado next season, they will have to have a 5-4 record. Once again, looking at their schedule, they do only have 9 games next season, and so you got to win 5 of these games if you're going to make it to a bowl game. But for Colorado, I would say, their chances are I would say pretty low. I mean, looking at, once again, Mel Tucker, he's no longer with this team, and the coaching issues are going to be pretty big for Colorado next season. And looking at how many losses this team is having in general, there are a lot of concerns here for Colorado, and I just don't think that this season is going to be a very good one for this team. And so, yeah, just be aware of that before we get into this prediction. As far as your first 3 games go, I think you do take a couple of losses to start off your season against Oregon and Arizona. And I think Oregon next season in general is a national contender. That's going to be a brutal game there. So you will take a loss against Oregon, but you're also going to take a loss against Arizona. And Arizona next season, they should be an improved team. Also, with it being on the road, I'll favor Arizona in that one. However, you will get a win against UCLA on October 17th, and that will be a close win. However, it will be a win in the end. So you will go 1-2 in your first 3 games. As far as your rest of October goes, I do think you'll take a couple losses there against Arizona State and USC. And I kind of went back and forth, especially on that Arizona State game. I think that one's going to be a very close one. But in the end, Arizona State will get the win in the end. Same thing with USC. I think USC next season is probably my early favorite to win that Pac-12 South. So I've got them winning that one. And then Washington State on November 7th. That one should be a win as well. I think Washington State next season, really not expecting much out of them. And so I think that one should be an easy win for Colorado in the end. So you go into your November, or the rest of your Novembers, well, I should say, with a 2-4 record, which really, I mean, in the end, I mean, considering how many losses this team is having for one, and for two, the coaching issues this team may have to deal with, I just think in general, I mean, with a 2-4 record going to the rest of November, which is going to be a tough stretch of games, I do think you lose your last 3 games. And I think Stanford next season should be an improved team, especially with that game being on the road. I think you're going to take a loss there. And I also think you'll lose to Washington in Seattle on the 21st. Same thing with Utah on the 28th. I think in the end you do go 2-7 next season, which really, I mean, when you look at how they canceled their non-conference games or how the Pac-12 canceled them, I mean, it doesn't look like a very good record with 2-7. But I mean, looking at those 3 non-conference games, you should probably win, or you would have probably won 2 of those 3 games. And so, I mean, that pretty much puts up a 4-8 record for Colorado next season, which still, I mean, it doesn't look great, but I just think Colorado next season will be in a bit of a rebuilding season. And I'm sure for most Buffalo fans, I mean, you guys probably aren't going to be very happy about this, but in the end, this is the best I see Colorado getting next season. I think they're going to be kind of one of the lower teams in the Pac-12 next season. And in general, I mean, it doesn't really help to have as tough as a schedule as this Colorado team does next season. I mean, you got to play Oregon, you got to play Arizona State, USC, Washington, and Utah next season. And it doesn't really help that you've got 3 of those games on the road. And so, in the end, yeah, your record prediction will be 2-7 for next season. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this team. Also, let me know whether you disagree with anything here. But if you enjoyed this preview, be sure to slap a like on it and subscribe as well. Really helps out the channel. I'd really appreciate that. Because once again, thanks again for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for more from All Sports Central, and I will see you all later.